1870, New England. A storm rattles the wooden orphanage as children huddle in the dark. One girl, pale, barefoot, whispering, warns, "Blow out the lantern, or someone won't wake." Hours later, death comes silently. Her name was Sarah Monroe, the orphan who foretold tragedies before they struck. Was she cursed, chosen, or condemned by fear? Before we dive in, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a chilling story from the past and uncover America's forgotten horrors that history tried to bury. The year was 1870, and though the Civil War had ended 5 years earlier, its shadow still hung over America. Graves dotted every hillside, churches overflowed with widows in black, and thousands of children found themselves abandoned in orphanages that were little more than wooden halls of discipline and despair. Inside these institutions was strict and joyless. Matrons enforced silence at mealtimes, demanded prayers before sleep, and punished even the faintest whisper after dark. The buildings smelled of smoke, damp wood, and boiled potatoes, their dormitories crowded with rows of iron beds. Orphans carried more than hunger. They carried grief, fear, and the superstitions of the age. Because outside those walls, America was obsessed with death. Spiritualism had swept through the country like wildfire. From New York parlors to rural farmhouses, grieving families gathered around tables, holding seances and paying mediums to summon the voices of lost soldiers. Photographers promised portraits of the dead hovering behind the living. Newspapers printed tales of visions, warnings, and ghostly children who spoke of things yet to come. In towns where every family had lost someone, no story of the supernatural felt impossible. Faith in God was preached each Sunday, but fear of the unknown lingered stronger in the quiet hours. It was into this world that Sarah Monroe's voice rose, a child of the war's aftermath, left without parents, placed in a strict orphanage, and marked by something none could explain. Her whispers of coming danger did not sound strange in a land already haunted. To some, she was a living sign of the spiritual age. To others, she was a cursed child whose very words seemed to invite tragedy. And so, in America's mourning, the stage was set for Sarah's story. Sarah Monroe arrived at the orphanage in the spring of 1869, a frail child of barely 9 years old. Both her parents had succumbed to illness within weeks of each other, her mother taken by fever, her father by pneumonia that followed. Neighbors, unwilling or unable to care for another mouth, sent Sarah off to the crowded brick orphanage on the outskirts of town. From the beginning, she stood apart. She was small for her age, her hair a dull, straw-like brown, her skin pale, and her eyes too old. Children whispered that she didn't blink often enough, that she stared through people instead of at them. She spoke little, rarely smiled, and often lingered alone in the corners of the drafty halls. The matron dismissed her as a delicate one, sickly and strange, but harmless. Yet the other children quickly began to fear her. For it wasn't just her silence, but the words she did speak. The first incident came one warm evening as the children queued for supper. Sarah tugged at a younger girl's sleeve and whispered, "Don't drink from the well tonight. The water is bad." The girl obeyed, but several others did not. Days later, 3 fell ill with stomach fever, writhing in the dormitory beds while Sarah sat silently by the window. Word spread. She knew. The orphans began avoiding her, muttering prayers when she passed. Some believed she was blessed. Others claimed she was cursed. Another time, during morning chores, she refused to sit near the hearth and warned, "It's not safe. The fire will fall." Hours later, a loose stone in the chimney sent sparks flying, scorching the matron's skirt before the flames were beaten out. The matron called it coincidence, but the children looked at Sarah with wide eyes, as if she had pulled the sparks from the bricks herself. From then on, She was no longer simply Sarah. She was the girl who knows. The matron scolded her for spreading fear, insisting she keep silent, but the whispers only grew stronger. Children began to cross themselves before bed. Some cried if Sarah's bed was near theirs. The orphanage was no longer haunted by loneliness or hunger alone. It was haunted by a child who seemed to speak tomorrow's tragedies before they arrived. And Sarah herself? She never smiled, never gloated. She only whispered her warnings and retreated into silence, as though carrying a burden no child should bear by the winter of 1870. Sarah's whispers were no longer dismissed as childish superstition. Each warning carried weight, for too many had come true. One Sunday morning, as the orphans lined the chapel benches for prayer, Sarah refused to kneel. She stared at the rafters and murmured, "Don't sit here. The wood is tired." The matron, furious, dragged her forward, forcing her to kneel with the others. Hours later, during evening service, a beam cracked overhead. Splinters rained down as part of the ceiling gave way. By sheer chance, no one was killed, but the congregation fled in terror, leaving behind overturned pews and the echo of Sarah's earlier warning. The matron called it luck, the carpenter called it rot, but the children whispered, "She told us." She told us. Not long after, Sarah issued another warning. She clutched the arm of a boy about to sneak to the barn at dusk and whispered, "Don't go. Not tonight. It will burn." He laughed and pulled free. Hours later, lightning split the sky, striking the barn and setting the hay ablaze. The glow lit the orphanage windows as children screamed, pressing their faces to the glass, watching the barn collapse in a roar of fire. The boy, pale and trembling, admitted Sarah had warned him. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Sarah's words, quiet and strange, seemed stitched to the tragedies that followed. Was she saving lives or inviting disaster? To some, her warnings were a shield. To others, they were the curse itself. Fear thickened inside the orphanage walls. Children avoided her shadow, yet clung to her words when she spoke. The matron scolded her, demanded silence, and accused her of spreading panic. Yet in private, even she began crossing herself when Sarah's gaze lingered too long. Soon, the rumors slipped beyond the orphanage. Townsfolk spoke of the medium child, whispering that the devil sometimes chose children as his mouthpiece. The pastor thundered from his pulpit, "Beware the girl who claims to see what only God knows." Visions are not heaven's blessing, but hell's deceit. But still the curious came. Farmers, widows, mothers of missing sons, all finding excuses to pass the orphanage gate, hoping to glimpse the girl who saw too much. By then, Sarah had ceased to be a lonely child. She was something far more unsettling, a figure of both dread and fascination, her silence broken only by words that seemed to carry the weight of fate itself, and her warnings were only growing darker by spring. The children began noticing a change in Sarah. She spoke less often, but when she did, her warnings grew sharper, heavier, like weights pressed into their chests. The most chilling came one gray morning as the orphans carried buckets toward the yard. Sarah stood still, staring at the stone well in the center of the grounds. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "The well is hungry." The words spread like smoke. Some laughed nervously, others refused to draw water. The matron scolded Sarah for filling young minds with nonsense, but several children began sneaking cups from the rain barrel instead of lowering the creaking rope into the darkness. Weeks passed, and Sarah repeated the warning more than once. Each time, her voice sounded fainter, almost as though she were echoing someone else's words. The well is hungry. Then came the day of the disappearance. It was near dusk when 11-year-old Thomas, the boldest boy in the orphanage, was seen playing marbles by the yard. No one noticed when he wandered too close to the well. By supper time, he was gone. At first, the matron assumed he was hiding to avoid chores. But when the children were gathered, his seat remained empty. A search began, lanterns swinging, boots crunching over dirt. Hours later, someone found a single shoe resting near the well's edge, damp from the stone. The rope hung loose, swaying, as though disturbed. The bucket floated on still water far below. But of Thomas there was no sign. Panic gripped the orphanage. Some children sobbed that Sarah had called it, that she had seen the well swallow him whole. Others whispered she hadn't foretold it, she had caused it, that her words carried power, and by speaking them, she gave the well its hunger. The matron snapped. She dragged Sarah to the chapel, forcing her to kneel beneath the wooden cross. With fire in her eyes, she declared, "This child is no prophet. She is a danger. Her tongue brings death." The pastor agreed, telling the town the devil often cloaked himself in children to lead the faithful astray. Fear spread like wildfire. Parents warned their children not to go near the orphanage grounds. Townsfolk muttered about witchcraft. Some claimed Sarah's gaze was enough to sour milk, to make dogs bark at empty corners. But late at night, when the wind carried the sound of the well's creaking rope, the children huddled in their beds, remembering Sarah's voice. The well is hungry. None dared fetch water alone after that. And none forgot the missing boy, whose single shoe was all that remained. Sarah had gone from the girl who knows to something more dreadful, the cursed child who spoke doom into being. The disappearance of Thomas and Sarah's ominous whispers left the orphanage in a state of quiet terror. Children tiptoed through the halls as though the very floorboards might betray them. Every creak of the well rope outside seemed to echo inside their heads. And Sarah? She spoke less now, her face gaunt, her eyes sunken, as if each vision drained something vital from her. Then one night, as snow pressed heavy against the windows and the lanterns flickered low, Sarah broke her silence. Standing in the dormitory doorway, she whispered, "The fire will come. It will take us all." The matron, exhausted by months of dread, struck her across the face. "Enough!" she roared. "Your poison ends here." She locked Sarah in the chapel that night, insisting that prayer would drive the devil out of her. But the children, lying awake in their narrow beds, trembled. They believed her. Days passed, and Sarah repeated her warning again and again. The fire will come. Some children refused to sleep near lanterns, while others begged the matron to douse the hearths. Her fury grew. She forced Sarah to scrub the floors until her hands bled, but still, the words would not stop. Then came the night it happened. It was February, the air bitter cold. The wind howled through the orphanage shutters, rattling the glass. Inside, the matron carried a lantern down the hallway, her boots striking hard against the wood. No one knows if she tripped, if the flame caught her skirts, or if Sarah's words carried the weight of inevitability. But soon, smoke curled under the doors. The fire spread fast, eating through the tinder-dry beams, filling the dormitory with choking black air. Children screamed, scrambling from their beds, clawing at locked doors and shuttered windows. The matron's shouts vanished into the roar of collapsing timber, and amid the chaos, one voice cut through the smoke, Sarah's. Witnesses later claimed they heard her cry, "Wake! Run! The fire is here!" Some said she pounded on doors, guiding younger children into the snow-filled yard. Others swore they saw her standing in the flames untouched, her eyes glowing in the inferno. By dawn, the orphanage was nothing but charred ruin. Half the children were gone, their names etched into the ash of that night. The matron's body was found near the chapel, her hands clasped around a blackened rosary. But Sarah Monroe was nowhere to be found. Some believed she perished in the flames, her body reduced to cinders. Others whispered she escaped into the woods, vanishing into the snow like smoke carried off by the wind. Still others claimed she had never been a child at all, but something older, a spirit bound to tragedy, finally released in the fire she had foretold. The official record listed only accidental fire caused by lantern, but the surviving orphans never forgot. They remembered her pale face, her hollow voice, and her final words, "The fire will come." For them, Sarah Monroe was not a child who died in the flames. She was the reason they had lived through them. And for the town, she became something else entirely, a ghost that no one could explain, but no one could deny. When the ashes cooled and the smoke cleared, the town faced the ruin of the orphanage. Burned timbers jutted like bones against the winter sky. The surviving children were scattered among neighboring farms and distant institutions, carrying with them scars, not only from fire, but from memory. The official record was quick, clinical, and final. Accidental fire, lantern mishap. No mention of Sarah Monroe. No account of her warnings, her whispers, her disappearance. The paperwork erased her, as though she had never existed at all. But the survivors remembered. In hushed voices, they told their foster families about the pale girl who always seemed to know. They whispered her name at night, recalling her eyes glowing through the smoke, her cry urging them to flee. For some, she was a savior. For others, a curse that drew disaster wherever she went. And so the legend began to take root. Farmers claimed that, for years after, they saw a small figure near the orphanage ruins, standing at the edge of the old well. Her dress gray, her face white as bone, her bare feet pressing into the snow, though the night was bitter cold. A girl who vanished if anyone came too close. Children in nearby towns began daring each other to walk to the ruins, to peer into the black mouth of the well, to see if they could hear a girl's whisper rising with the wind. Some swore they heard her words, "The well is hungry." Others claimed they felt a sudden heat at their backs, like fire breathing against their necks. Over time, Sarah Monroe became less of a girl and more of a ghost story, the orphan who foretold tragedies, the cursed child who vanished in flame. Her name was never carved into stone, never honored in a graveyard. Yet she lingered, not in records, but in whispers. Every town keeps its ghosts. For this one, it was Sarah, a child erased by history, but remembered in fear. Sarah Monroe's story sits on the edge between history and legend, fact and fear. The official records will tell you nothing, just an accidental fire, a tragedy among many in those hard years. But the voices of survivors, the whispers passed down through generations, suggest something more. Was Sarah truly gifted with a second sight, cursed to carry visions of death before they came? Or was she only a child of grief, her warnings born from sharp eyes, restless nights, and the dark superstitions of a mourning nation? Perhaps she was both, a lonely girl whose voice echoed louder than anyone wished to admit. A child erased by ink and paper, yet immortalized by rumor, by folklore, by the shiver that still runs through those who hear her name. In the end, every town carries its ghosts. For this one, it was Sarah Monroe, the orphan who spoke of tragedies before they came, and then vanished into fire. If Sarah's tale unsettled you, share this story, subscribe, and join me as we bring more of America's forgotten horrors back into the light.